Since Vatican II, women have been assuming roles of increasing importance in celebrating the new Mass. Perhaps, therefore, it should come as no surprise that many are openly calling for the ordination of women as priests, such as the Women's Ordination Conference. Well, perhaps even further, it should be no surprise that this past August, 3 women with a priest concelebrated a new Mass in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The Women's Ordination Conference praised the event and said that it was the first time they had heard of women sharing the altar and the Eucharistic prayers during a mainstream Sunday service. I'm Julius Stretona. This is What Catholics Believe. With me today to discuss women priests are 3 priests who celebrate the traditional Latin Mass exclusively. Father William Jenkins, pastor of St. Teresa of the Child Jesus Church in Parma, Ohio, and also principal of St. Gertrude Academy of Cincinnati, Ohio. Father Donald Sanborn, pastor of St. Pius X Church in Warren, Michigan, and Father Clarence Kelly, spiritual director of the Daughters of Mary, a congregation of traditional Roman Catholic sisters in Round Top, New York. Reverend Fathers, just briefly to review, this was the Minneapolis Star-Tribune of August 18th, 1990, Saturday edition, and the headline was "Women Celebrate Masses with Priest." And it said here that these women were said, when Teresa Graham walked into St. Joan of Arc Church in Minneapolis Sunday morning, she expected to read the gospel passages to the congregation and return to her pew. Instead, the Minneapolis woman and 2 other women parishioners may have carved a place for themselves in local Catholic history when they joined a visiting priest in celebrating Mass at the altar during 2 Sunday Masses. And it says further, the small act holds a huge significance for the Catholic movement demanding greater rights for women, including ordination into the priesthood. It is also a direct violation of Catholic doctrine, which permits only ordained priests to celebrate the Eucharist. And at any rate, it said, one man, this woman says, came up to me afterward and said, "This is the most important thing you've ever do in your life." And Graham said, "I suppose he was right. It's a cutting-edge type of a thing." And it says here also, the event elicited a standing ovation during the 11 o'clock Mass at Joan of Arc, a liberal Catholic church in South Minneapolis. It also drew praise from the National Women's Ordination Conference, which said it was the first time they had heard of women sharing the altar and Eucharist prayers during a mainstream Sunday service. What's the reaction to this event?
It's just one more sign that the Reformed religion is not the Catholic religion, that the effects of Vatican II have been the corruption of the Catholic faith, and that this is a departure from apostolic doctrine and tradition. It is something unheard of in the history of the Catholic Church, and it is really just one more nail in the coffin of the new religion. If you look in any theology book of the Catholic Church, it excludes explicitly women from the priesthood. And it says that women cannot be validly ordained to be priests. And it says that in the history of the Church this has never been done, that it wasn't even conferred on the Blessed Virgin Mary herself, the priesthood, and that this is something that is just absolutely invalid.
It'd be like a man who wanted to be a nun. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But it's also ironic, because what is characteristic of the post-Vatican II religion is an attack on the priesthood. A priest is a man taken from among men, appointed in the things which appertain to God, and he offers sacrifice and forgives sins in the name of Christ. And there is this tremendous effort to change the word priest into something else. Even in the ordination rite, they use the English word presbyter, which has a greater signification in the Presbyterian Church than it does in the Catholic Church. But they want to get away from all of the externals and the trappings of the priesthood. But when it comes to women, they are very, very determined to use the word priest. They wouldn't say we want to have women ministers, right? They use the word minister to describe what a priest is, or the president of the assembly. They don't come out and say, we want women to be presidents of the assembly or ministers and so forth and so on. They always use the word priest. So it is very, very ironic that what they want to take away from the man, they want to bestow upon the woman. It's a principle of reversal. It is, apart from the fact that it's ironic and somewhat, I suppose, humorous if it were not so serious, it is also a thing which smacks of the satanic, because Lucifer has been described, and even the fathers of the church called him the ape of God. The ape of God. In other words, Lucifer tries to relegate to himself things which are given to God, but he does it in a reverse fashion. So here you have a situation in which he is trying to reverse the role of the man and the woman. The woman is the priest and the man is the minister.
This whole question of women priests actually is a logical continuation of the modern Vatican II Church's distortion of the very idea of priesthood. As Father Kelly said, they try to get away from the whole use of the word priest, because they're getting away from the very concept of what the Catholic priesthood is. But they insist on giving the word, the title priest to women, because they have generalized the priesthood to what they call the priesthood of the people. And they've completely gotten away from the idea of sacrifice. A priest is ordered to the sacrifice. It's a natural ordering of the priest to the sacrifice. And when they've done away with the idea of sacrifice in the modern church, like the Mass is no longer the sacrifice of Calvary, it is just an offering of the people, a sacrifice of their praise and their thanksgiving to God. It is not the sacrifice of Jesus Christ anymore on Calvary. And so what they have is the priesthood of the people. Anybody can offer God thanksgiving and praise. Anybody. Only Jesus Christ, the true high priest, can offer a sacrifice of reparation for the sins of mankind. Since they have thrown that out the window of the modern churches, and all they have left is a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving, so-called, they have no need for a priesthood, as the Catholic Church has always conceived it. Now all they need is somebody to represent the assembly, somebody to stand up there and to talk into the microphone, lead the singing, play the guitar, or the banjo, or whatever is going on at the time. And that is ministry, and for them that is priesthood. They're having in Rome right now a synod, which the modern bishops have traveled from all over the world to attend, and this synod is on the priesthood, and they're supposed to be addressing the question of the declining numbers of their ministers, the priests. And this is, for them, some kind of crisis, or at least they claim it's a crisis, but the remedies all tend to be in the direction of lowering the requirements necessary to be priests. And John Paul II has said, we're not even going to discuss getting rid of celibacy. If celibacy comes up, we're going to talk about it only insofar as we want to reinforce the devotion to celibacy in our modern clergy. But in the midst of this very synod, where he was widely touted as saying, we're not going to do away with celibacy, it has suddenly come out in the press that he recently approved of 2 married men in South America being ordained priests. So this is typical double talk of saying one thing and then contradicting it by what you do. And this is why the church is in such terrible confusion today, and this is why people get away with these travesties, and why the people who are pushing for women's ordination are in the ascendancy.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because there was an article in the New York Times on October 18th, 1990, dealing with these 2 married priests. You know, it seems, fathers, that many well-intentioned people look at the confusion in the church and they say, well, if people would only follow John Paul II, but those bishops are rebellious, they don't obey him, these theologians and canon lawyers are rebellious, that what can he possibly do? Well, they seem to forget that, number one, over half the bishops in the world were appointed by John Paul II. They seem to forget that the Canon Law Society of America had a meeting in Cleveland, a week-long meeting, and they defeated a bid for married priests. And then who approves 2 married men becoming priests who are married and were told to live as brother and sister? John Paul II. My question, why has nothing, at least as of this taping, why has nothing been done upon this blasphemy, this sacrilege? Why have the bishops said nothing? Why has John Paul II not said anything, who excommunicated Archbishop Lefebvre for consecrating 4 bishops, along with Archbishop de Meyer?
Well, Archbishop Roach, who is the ordinary there, in the Novus Ordo ordinary in Minneapolis, St. Paul, he did chasten the priest who did that, and who beckoned the women to come up and join him. But I don't know, I think he was denied faculties in the diocese or something like that. But he's still a Roman Catholic priest in good standing, like Hans Kung and all the rest of the heretics. The only people who really have anything effectively done against them are those who are trying to hold to the old faith. So it's just a showpiece that they leveled against them, some meaningless slap on the wrist, and that is to placate the conservatives in the modern religion. You know, I mentioned the Synod not many minutes ago. The National Conference of Catholic Bishops elected a president named Archbishop Daniel Polarczyk, who is the Bishop of Cincinnati. And this president of the bishops in this country proposed at the Synod that we need a definition of the priesthood if we're going to talk about the crisis in the priesthood and how to increase the numbers of priests, as if the church really never knew what the priesthood was. And the definition that he proposed had nothing whatsoever to do with sacrifice. I don't even recall that it mentioned sacraments in the Catholic sense. It mentioned service of the people, representing the people. It was a priesthood that could have, a definition of priesthood that was so general it could have fit any pagan religion at any time in the world's history.
My question, just going back for just one moment, is this. Why has the church, for all the history, refused to permit women to become priests? What was the reason?
It's contrary to the divine ordinance. Clearly, priests were men. In Judaism, also, by the way, only men were priests, and clearly in the New Testament, from the very beginning, even, we could say, if you take the Last Supper, at which the apostles were ordained bishops, priests and bishops, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, the exalted Queen of Heaven and Earth, was not even present at the Last Supper, at which time our Lord instituted the New Testament priesthood. So it is the teaching, the infallible teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, that only a man can become a priest. In fact, the problem with Bishop Polarczyk, perhaps, is that he doesn't understand the meaning of the word priest. The definition of a priest, according to the Apostle Paul in his epistle to the Hebrews, is a man taken from among men. So it must be a man taken from among men to represent men in the things which appertain to God.
You're watching What Catholics Believe. We're discussing women priests. Going back to our main theme, I was going to ask something which perhaps is related to the question of women priests, and this is divorce. There was a meeting during the week, in middle of October 1990 in Cleveland, of the Canon Law Society of America. And the canon lawyers were addressed by a Reverend Harmon D. Skillen, a pastor and canon lawyer in the Stockton, California Catholic Diocese. And he said that there was an earlier tradition of the Catholic Church that recognized second marriages as illicit but valid. And he said he thinks the restoration of this tradition would provide us with another basis for dealing with people of our own day. Moreover, he said that the former tradition, the first marriage, was regarded as a fragile union which needs special care. To break it and enter a second marriage is against the will of God and is gravely illicit. Yet, he said, the second marriage was sanctioned by the Church until about the 10th century, despite being regarded as being illicit, because, as one pope said, if one, quote, cannot live chastely, it is better that he marry, unquote. What's your reaction to this statement?
What is his name?
Reverend Harmon D. Skillen from Stockton, California, a canon lawyer nonetheless.
Yeah. He sounds like one of the professors I had when I was at the seminary, before I went to the seminary in Switzerland. And the reason I said that is because there was a type of theology taught which I call article theology. In other words, they don't use books, They don't, as a general rule, textbooks, but they use articles that have been published in various types of magazines, and which are characterized by the making up of truth and the making up of facts and the creation of events in history. That is an absolute absurdity. That is an expression of that view of reality which says nothing is either true or false, but thinking makes it so. It is just not true. It's false.
My question is, how is it that, you know, these people come up, say this thing, widely quoted in the media, and yet the hierarchy does nothing to correct it, and Catholics are confused. They're saying, oh, gee, maybe it's okay that they're divorced.
It's another sign that the new church is not under the inspiration of the Holy Ghost. It is a sign that it is an institution that is purely human. It is a sign that of its contempt for apostolic tradition. One of the marks, the characteristics of the Catholic Church is that it is apostolic. The idea of a woman priest is so contrary to apostolic tradition. It flies in the face of this link that we have with the apostles and our Lord Jesus Christ, that it is just a sign to the whole world that this is not a true religion, that this new reformed Vatican II faith is not the Catholic faith. And the same thing is true of that somebody could entertain divorce. I mean, the Catholic Church lost England over a divorce, and the Catholic Church alienated Napoleon over a divorce and a remarriage. And if ever there were any kind of way out for those popes to take in order to preserve England from the monster of Henry VIII or preserve France from the monster of Napoleon, they would have taken it. And it's just absurd to say that there's such a thing.
Father Jenkins.
As Father Sanborn says, the Church paid a terrible price because she would never recognize divorce and remarriage. The Catholic Church lost a nation, and many Catholics shed their blood as a result of the Church's resolute stand against divorce. And it may come to the time when Catholics shed blood also because they will not admit women priests when the civil law says they have to because it's a civil right or something like that. You know, it's ironic that the modern Church of Vatican II should so often quote Paul. Paul says this and Paul says that, meaning, of course, St. Paul. At the same time, they are making an absolute mockery of his words, let women keep silent in church, and if a woman will not cover her head in church, showing her submission to her husband, let her be shorn, let her hair be cut off. And this is what St. Paul said, and this is what Father Sanborn is saying, that they've totally repudiated any apostolic connection whatsoever in favor of modern culture. Wherever Paul is fortunate to have stumbled across something that is acceptable to the modern age, then he's lionized. But wherever he made a big boo-boo and said something that the modern world doesn't approve of, then he's totally disregarded. This is pick and choose. This is the picking and choosing of the modern church, and it is not Roman Catholic.
Right. You know, there's something else that came out of this this conference, which I thought was very interesting, as the headline of the article was, "Bishops are limited in sanctions on pro-choice issue." And what Roman Catholic, supposedly, Reverend Francis J. Morrissey said that a person cannot be denied access to the sacraments unless 4 conditions are met simultaneously. The person involved must obstinately persist in manifest grave sin. Now, this Reverend Morrissey teaches canon law at St. Paul University in Ottawa, Canada. He said in an interview that talking about or even advocating pro-choice on abortion is not automatically a sin for which a person should be denied the sacraments under church law. In other words, he doesn't think it's a grave sin. What do you think about this?
Well, it's absolutely absurd. A choice is always determined by what you're choosing. To be pro-choice is a meaningless statement. What are you choosing? It's like the road you take is determined by where it goes. And to say I am pro-choice means I am for abortion. I defend the right of someone to have an abortion. That is a grave sin of heresy. That is a denial of the Church's moral teaching. It is a denial of the natural law. It is to favor murder. For someone to say that's not a sin, well, then what is a sin if that's not a sin to do that? And why do we have abortions except because people accept it in their minds? Nothing happens in the physical order before somebody accepts it first in their minds. And when someone says, well, it's okay to have an abortion, then you have the abortions in the practical order. So it's a worse sin to think it than actually to, in a way it is. It's a worse sin.
It's also a gross hypocrisy. The fact of the matter is that there are two positions on this, and one is pro-life and the other is pro-death. And these people are pro-death. If someone, for example, proposed that here is a group, for example, the Ku Klux Klan, they marched up in upstate New York, and someone said, what do you think of the Ku Klux Klan? And he said, well, I'm pro-choice on that. You know, if you think it's fine to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan, fine. I think that's okay. I'm pro-choice. I won't condemn them. Or what do you think of slavery? What do you think of the idea of taking a segment of the population, say Asians or blacks or Irish or Italians, and turning them into slaves? Don't you think that should be condemned? And he says, well, you know, in my personal opinion, I think it's wrong, but I'm pro-choice. I don't think that the law should forbid it. It's an absurdity and an hypocrisy. Those who are pro-choice are pro-death.
Father Jenkins.
The woman priesthood movement is often tied to a naturalistic, almost occult way of thinking. We see in our day a great resurgence in Wicca, which is a witchcraft, and we see a great resurgence for this holistic, one with the earth business, and that manifests itself in various ways. It manifests itself in the worship of the environment, the worship of Mother Earth, and so on. This is all a return to paganism, is all it is. And I fear that the tendency of the woman priest movement is one with this worship of Mother Earth and a manifestation of the return to paganism.
You know, my other question I have is as follows. It seems that the bishops have resigned not to do anything, with the one exception, I think, was Bishop Mayer, who was roundly castigated by this Father Morrissey, who said he was especially critical of the now retired Bishop of San Diego, Leo Mayer, who denied now State Senator Lucy Kilea communion when she was running for office last year because of her pro-choice stance. We're getting these elections now where Catholics are openly, quote-unquote, pro-choice. And the people who are supposed to be pro-life, it turns out they're really not pro-life. They say, well, I'm against abortion except in the case of rape or incest or to save the life of the mother. Well, that's totally against Catholic teaching. Why is it that, I mean, not a whimper is coming out of these bishops about that? And yet, we see the bishop releases a detailed statement on the environment where he said, you know, this earth isn't really ours. We share it members of communities which aren't necessarily human. What are we to make of this?
Well, these bishops are not interested in man's relationship to God and his way of getting to heaven. They're not interested in that. They are interested in the things of this world. The question of whether abortion is moral or not is to them a very unimportant thing. Morality, that's unimportant to them. They're concerned about the physical things of this world, socialism and environmentalism and things that affect your daily life. But they would consider abortion to be something that is an abstraction of the mind and which is a personal matter. If they had any conscience at all, I mean, just as a normal human being, in their position they would be clamoring against it. But they don't.
There are also other implications. For example, in this business of being one with Mother Earth and the earth is not ours and all the rest of that, that is explicitly contrary to the revelation of Almighty God. Man was made for God, and the rest of creation was made for man. Man is not the servant of the earth. The earth is the servant of man. Man is not here for the sake of the earth or the sake of the universe, but the entire universe, the whole universe, if we could reach to the end of the universe or go down to the smallest particle of matter, all of it was made by God for man, and man was made for God. This business of being one with the earth and this sacred character of the earth is, in my personal opinion, a reflection of that reversal of teaching, which is also, at least by implication, satanic.
It's a form of paganism.
Reverend Fathers, thank you. We're out of time. We need your help.